So today we're going to define CRM. We're going to sort of figure out what that means, and it may be slightly different than what you think. We're going to look at what the benefits of a CRM approach are. Then we're going to talk about really the process of how we get from spreadsheets everywhere to CRM. So how many people here have at least one Access database they're using? Okay, all right, a few of you. How many have, let's say, 5 or more spreadsheets that they use to do reporting and other work? All right, well, then you guys are in the right place. So when we go and we talk about this, there's an organization in Philadelphia called Alex's Lemonade Stand. Has anybody ever heard of Alex's Lemonade Stand? It's a wonderful organization. The Scott's little daughter was diagnosed with a incurable form of cancer, and she was a little girl, and really sort of stepped outside of her own issues and decided she wanted to do a lemonade stand, knowing that it wouldn't help her, but hoping to raise money so that other children wouldn't have to go through what she was going through. So the idea is that you have lemonade stands in schools and so forth that raise money. And it's obviously a very touching story, and it's very heartfelt, and they can tell their story and raise a lot of money to support the organization. They do great work. However, most of us don't have a story that's quite so wonderful. So we have to work a little harder at collecting, maintaining, and being able to tell our story through the use of data. And one of the things we can do is create a CRM system. Before we go any further, in spite of the fact that people walk through the expo and everybody and their brother has a CRM or a CMS, apparently they're really easy to do because there's 1,000 software packages out there now. This is not an easy process for nonprofits. So stop and think if you even want to take this on. It is not easy. I usually tell my clients that if you think, and this is because you're walking the park, you got it wrong. If you think you've got all of your stuff and your ducks in a row and your house is clean and everything is fine, I'm going to find the dust bunnies. Because we're going to go through all of your closets and all of your drawers. We're going to talk to all of the people, and it's not a passive process. I'm sure most of you here have been through the process of creating a new website, right? Yeah? Okay? So usually you go, you find a web designer, and you tell them you want an energetic, colorful, simple, easy-to-use website that reflects the values of your organization. I've taken those requirements a couple dozen times. So that's generally what it is, and the designer goes off and comes back with a blue website. And now it needs to be a little bit lighter. It comes back with a lighter blue website. And eventually you get to a place where the design works and the structure works for you. That process doesn't work for CRM. You have to be involved in the process the whole way. So it's long, requires a large amount of staff time and focus and energy. And it can be, and usually most times it is, intrusive to an organization's actual operating process. So there's the Wikipedia definition of CRM. Write that down. When we break this down, the C generally and traditionally is about customer. And in the nonprofit world, that doesn't fit quite as well. Sometimes it's consumer or client. I really like constituent. Constituent really covers the whole avenue, the breadth and depth of nonprofit. So then we have relationship management. So if we look at constituent, nowadays people we're dealing with wear a lot of hats. They may be board members or funders or volunteers or donors or people that you're actually providing programming to, and they may be more than one of those things. So if we're looking at various people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, how important is somebody that volunteers for your organization just once? Or maybe they gave you a $50 donation, right? Or they come to a workshop or a lecture that you have, or maybe they are in one of your service programs. Individually, that's not that important, any single one of those. But what if all of these things were the same person? Right? What if this same money and volunteered and come to your workshop, obviously that person is starting to understand and buy into your organization. So one of the things we're looking to do with CRM is to create that 360-degree view so that the development office can see what the programming people are doing, the programming staff. They can see who is involved in the programming. And that the executive director can see that the donor that they're going to talk to at a lunch has also been a volunteer for the organization for years. Relationship. To me, this is probably the biggest sort of misunderstood part of CRM. Right? A lot of people think CRM is a database. Oh, I need a new CRM. I'm just going to get a database. I can do it in my Outlook, or I'll just do it in Access, or whatever. That does not create and manage a relationship. So when we're talking about a relationship, have you ever, you run into an old college roommate or somebody you worked with years ago, or somebody you played softball with? What do you immediately talk about? You talk about the things that you have in common, those shared experiences. I've been a baseball coach for years and years, and I used to get my players as a team to go out and volunteer to clean yards and sell hot dogs at the basketball games, and I didn't care what they did so long as they did it together to build that idea of relationships. Now, we don't have to necessarily have sort of win World Series. I'm from Philadelphia. It's a year past, and I will give the Yankees a nod, but look out, we're coming back. We don't have to win a World Series to have a relationship, and we don't with our constituents, and we don't have to do a rope climb or a trust fall. The idea is, have you ever just gotten sort of a blank email about, from some organization you work with, and it's just a form email, and it doesn't address you at all, or any of your concerns, or it asks if you want to volunteer, and you volunteered last week, right? So people that we deal with in organizations expect us to understand and honor the relationships and the experiences that we've had with them. And CRM is a way to do that. So now the management part really comes into sort of the idea of the database. How many people here have a data entry person still? Okay? You have somebody in your organization who has a big pile of paper and their job is to enter this stuff. Here's another issue or change that you're going to have to manifest inside your organization if you want to get to this CRM holy grail. We have to enter the data and collect it at the point of sale, at the touch point. So if I am calling someone, I need to enter the data that I called someone, right? No longer can we create an attendance sheet and then just hand it to an entry person, because we are going to collect more discrete data points in a CRM than we are traditionally or able to in an Access database or a spreadsheet. The idea here is that ultimately we want to grab those touches we've had with someone. Did we talk to them about a donation? Did they come to a workshop? Did somebody send them an email about volunteering? All of these things add up to create a picture of the person we're dealing with. If we don't have that picture, we cannot honor or talk about that relationship appropriately. So we need to get away from the data entry clerk. I had a client that I went in and they were really frustrated. They, once a quarter, the chief operating officer would go to the data entry person and say, oh, time for quarterly reports. And the core data entry person would throw aside everything they've been doing and spend 2 weeks pulling together these quarterly reports. And they brought me in, oh, Dee, can you help us? This is so painful. We need to be able to do these reports more quickly. Shelley is spending way too much time on this. And so I described what all of this is and what it means and went through a lot of the stuff we're going to talk today. And I said, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to change some things you do around here in the way you think. And the chief operating officer I was talking to at the time said, yep, I know. I'm going to have to hire another data entry clerk. And I said, it's not the data entry clerk. When you want a report, you're going to pull it out of the system. because everybody is going to be entering data on the system on a daily basis. We're not going to have to catch up with 2 weeks of data entry and then figure out what reports we want. It is a much more immediate kind of outlook. So what is CRM? So some people really believe it's a database. And in fact, in a lot of ways, the basis or the management of a CRM system within an organization is centered around a database. It's a tool for managing service delivery. So I don't think that this is one that often comes into play around CRM. Most often CRM lives on the donation side where we want to manage these people. But if we're doing this right, we're going to have a clearer view of the demographics of the people and how we work with them and how we're delivering our services. It's a way to document the work you do. Right? We all have funders and donors and government agencies and even executive directors and bosses that we need to report to. And if we've got a spreadsheet or 12 or an Access database, it can be very difficult to know what really we've accomplished sometimes. So this sort of point of sale data entry allows us to look and see a little bit better what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. It really is a system that supports the whole idea of relationship building. And we need to look at it that way. If we come in with the sort of the jaded view that all this is about collecting more data so we can get more money, that's not going to work for you. You really have to approach it from the point of, we need to build better relationships with our donors. We need to understand better what our funders are looking to do and communicate the work we're doing with them. We need to recognize the work that our volunteers do, value it, express that to them, and express it to others. So it's a system that supports that kind of relationship. Ultimately, though, it's an organizational approach to doing business. We've decided that we are going to do CRM, that the relationships with our constituents, our stakeholders, our board members, our staff, those relationships are the most important things to us. This is a slide I call a scare slide, right? There's a lot of things on there, and the idea of this is the competition. This is what the ecosphere is these days. We've got Twitter, and we've got YouTube, we've got all these things, and then you've got all the fringe things, and then you have the things that add on to that. So you've got this huge competition for just sound, for someone to even hear you. And if you just throw broad communications that you think are what people want at the wall, they're going to go splat and no one will ever hear them. We must become more targeted, more precise, clearer, and have a better understanding of what and how our constituencies want to be reached. This is what you're fighting against. So the coin of the realm really is the relationships we have with our clients and our board members and our stakeholders of various kinds. But in the past, it's sort of been questionable about who owns that relationship. Everybody has seen or knows, and I'm sure there's none of them here, but the traveling development director that takes their little black book from nonprofit to nonprofit to nonprofit, right? It's somebody that's been in the nonprofit world for 30 years, and they show up, and the reason they're hired is because they own these relationships. They can raise the money. They have the connections. And when they leave, they take the black book with them. They're taking your value, your coin, your assets right out of your company. You don't have the institutional knowledge to know that this person donated because they had a sister that this happened to. You can't go back there once they're gone. So this is a system that allows you to control your own sort of institutional knowledge. The engagement ladder. This shouldn't be new to anybody in the nonprofit community. It's sort of a standard idea. Somebody comes and they ask for information on your website, then they're a donor, then they volunteer, and then they're a bigger donor, and ultimately they're giving you $1 million, right? So we're trying to move everybody up that engagement ladder. Well, really, how do you do that, right? So, well, We build relationships with these people. It's really that simple. If we want to move people up this engagement ladder, they're not doing it because they like the color of your logo or because your big red donate now button is bigger. They're doing it because of the relationships they've built within the organization. They give money or they ask for information because they have some sort of connection already. That initial connection comes from them. After that, it's your job to take that and bring them up the ladder. So here's the mirror. Everybody look into the mirror and see how many of these things ring true for you. Routine program reports are painful to produce. The quarterly reports take you a week. The weekly reports take you 2 days. The monthly reports take you 8 days. If this is you're using a lot of paper and you have to chase all over for information on service delivery, right? So the nonprofit world has a lot of chiefs. Any chiefs in here? Everybody's a little chief with their own little fiefdom, right? And when that happens, everybody does things their own way, and it's worked really well in the nonprofit community. We pay little, we hire young, we give people a lot of responsibility. Sort of the model. Right? When that happens, now this information is distributed, and when we're trying to see what are we delivering, it's in a lot of different places. There's no easy way to see what's happening now. The information you have is anecdotal. It's narrative. It's not metrics. It's not numbers. It's not a dashboard that you can look at and say, we serve this many people in this time period. You get used to guessing about service. Yeah, how many people you said, oh, we were roughly around 400 last year. Oh, yeah, we did better this year. It seemed busier. Right? You're guessing about what's really going on. And you ultimately have separate and disconnected data files. Stuff is all over the place in a lot of different silos, which ultimately leads to data entry and redundant work. And then here's the real sort of killer here, poor communications and information sharing. One group doesn't know what the other group is doing, and generally, nor do they care. But so if we're looking at life, and by the way, how many people fit some or all of those? So life with the CRM is just basically way better. That's all it is. It's just, it'll wash your car, it'll shampoo your hair. It's kind of cool. So really, ultimately what it is, it's a tool for growth for the organization. And the way I come to that is, you can only grow if you can do so strategically. True growth comes from strategic thought and planning. And if you do not know what you're doing now, it's really impossible to plan for what you should do next. So if we can get a look at what we're doing now and how we're serving and who we're serving, now we can make strategic decisions about how and where we grow. So there's the traditional siloed approach. And really, we really have to break out of this. And we're talking CRM today, and as I mentioned CMS already once. And one of the things I want to make clear is I don't see them as separate things, and I don't see this as sort of separate data streams. Today, when you want to deal with someone, anyone, a business, a library, whatever, where do we go first? We go to the web. We go to the internet. We go to their web pages. We are entering stuff in forms more than we ever have. Well, that's great. So how do you record how you're doing business with people? Well, our database, of course, or our spreadsheets. But you create this whole new brand spanking beautiful CRM, and you never think about, oh, wait a minute, what about the data from the website? Well, I'm sorry, your CRM doesn't have an open API. It doesn't talk to websites. Right? We've got to think about this holistically. We really have to understand that this is sort of the whole idea of how we're doing business, and think about how we want to conduct business and how we want to track that work. So the goals of a good system are something that records interactions with the multiple constituencies. So it's not just donors, it's not just volunteers, it's also programming and everything else about that. We're able to track the shared experience. So that means being able to see when someone is meeting with someone, or what emails were sent out to a group of volunteers, or what e-newsletters went to what specific targeted points of our stakeholders. We have a decentralized data entry system so that the people that are doing the work enter the information. And it's become a part and parcel of the fabric of the organization. So that when you're sitting in the weekly status meeting, somebody pulls up your database and shows the dashboard for what happened this week, rather than pulling up a spreadsheet and handing it around on a piece of paper. So the CRM project, as we go through this, the first part of that is we need to set up and create a successful environment for this to happen. So we can't just start one day and decide, ooh, we want to do CRM, let's go hire somebody. It really has to start by creating the appropriate place within your organization where you're not going to be successful. So a successful environment really has quite a few different parts to it. But you need to understand what success means to you and your organization. You need to talk about what that means and look at that. You have to establish and communicate a need. Identify the low-hanging fruit. Understand why you're doing this and communicate to your staff and stakeholders. You want to start the buy-in with your organization. That really is in two places. You need to do it in the executive leadership of the organization, and you need to do it in sort of the organization of the staff as a whole. And I put those separately because they're both crucial and they really involve separate things and separate approaches. It's really easy for a sort of a technophobic executive director to say, oh yeah, okay, go ahead. Right? The board says we need it, go ahead. Right? And an executive director that says, this is how we're changing and this is what we're doing, everybody get on board. It creates a whole different approach to the project. And certainly, it can influence how well this is received in the rest of the organization. You need to start looking at and collecting the requirements for your CRM. And really, people like, okay, that's great, what does that mean? You start looking at inputs, outputs, and your business process. We're going to talk a little bit more about what those things mean. But you need to start understanding, it's sort of like when you go shopping for a car, at least initially, do we need a sports car, or a four-door sedan, or a minivan? So it's starting to understand what your reality looks like. So one of the things I said, identify what success means to you. So here are some examples of what some of those things may be. And these are really taken from what we identify as a successful project at Power PA. It's tweaked a little bit. But a CRM that was completed on time and on budget. That will make a lot of the accounting group and the board and the executive team really happy if we can finish it on time and on budget. And you'll see how that can be accomplished as we move forward. We need a CRM that meets the business needs of the organization. That may sound trite and sort of easy, but it's a hard thing to obtain, right? So if that's your stated goal, now you've got to figure out what are our business needs and how do we meet them. CRM is one that you're happy with and you understand. Right? If you don't know where to enter a volunteer, a CRM isn't going to do much good. If you don't know how to pull the data out to see what's happening today, your CRM isn't going to do much good. You have to be able to understand it and be happy with it. And then, this is the one that tears me up. You need to have one that's sustainable for your organization. It does you no good to spend a lot of money to bring in crack hardcore developers to build a SQL.NET system for you that they believe, and this system is there, and the next week you want to put in what is your favorite ice cream flavor, and you got to go spend another $3,000 to find some programmer to figure out what the other programmer did, and then enter that. Does you no good if it's a system that you cannot bring along with you, that's sort of static and built and done the day it's complete. It begins to grow obsolete if you don't touch it. So we need to create something that you can maintain and it can live and exist and grow with your organization. And ultimately, the easiest sort of metric for this is one that you use. If you're not using it, usually there's a problem, and we're going to talk about what that means as well. When you establish a need within your organization, you need to sort of come from the idea of big picture. This is sort of the initial sort of needs assessment, and this is where we start getting the leadership around this project. Ultimately, like any other sort of project management, or other system or dramatic change with an organization, the better the leadership, the better the communication, the better the process of change, the better the outcome. So leadership is one of the things that's not often stated here as critical to this. But you have to have someone in place that's driving this, that's enough of a leader that can communicate what that need is to people and get them to understand the vision. All right? So we need to build the buy-in from day one. You cannot wait until you have the software package, roll it out and go, hey everybody, here's the new thing we're going to use, come meet it. Right? You're going to get a lot of stiff arms and you get a lot of people that are suddenly really busy doing other things. So this buy-in's got to start right from the start. And I've created sort of a system around buy-in. It's one of the issues I am called in on other CRM implementations that I did not do and say, oh, nobody's using it. What can we do to change that? So the thing here is lead, right? What does that mean? Listen to the needs of your users. Nobody likes to be told how to do their job. They've been doing it for 10 years, and you just showed up last week to build a CRM, and you're going to tell someone how to do their job. Listen to the needs of the users. You don't have to hear everything they say. And I'll say that again. You don't have to hear everything that they say or they want. Right? But you need to listen to them, and they need to feel like they're being listened to in order for this to work. Express the vision of the final outcome. Let people know that we're going through this this maybe flawed process, and it may be difficult along the way, but really if we can create a vision that's beyond the pain. So one of the issues about building a system that encompasses sort of multiple silos, so if we're talking about programming and development and whatever, you may ultimately be looking at a system that's developed and is not, so there's a bunch of systems out on the floor here that are sort of single silo products. Not to say there's anything bad with that, but if you have a single product, you have a whole group of people that are sitting around all day, every day to think about how to do development better. Right? There's some really high-priced development programs and applications that are great. They're terrific. If you need to raise $1 billion, you better go get one of those. If you're raising a couple hundred or $1 million or whatever it is about your organization, you need all those bells and whistles. So as a development director, can you forego maybe some capabilities for yourself so that we can get a picture and a look of what's going on with volunteers as well? Think of the advantage that you may have because the volunteer group is now entering their data and you can see somebody that's both donated and volunteered. So we need to talk about how an individual may have to sacrifice a little bit for the good of the whole. There's that good of the whole. Align the system to your users' needs. So this means a couple of things. We've listened, and here's what we've done related to what your needs are, right? Relating the system to what they've expressed. Hey, wait a minute. Here's the example of Marcus. Windows 7 was my idea. Right? Okay? So here is something, we heard you, and this is the result of that. Or, hey, this is the whole new thing that's going to get you to do, you're going to get 40 more volunteers a week if you just do this. And then the last thing is you have to drive the process. You're not going to get buy-in from people or develop the whole system if there's no communication, if there's no energy, if there's no one that's going, hey, let's have another Friday meeting about CRM. Yes, I know it's hard, but I'm bringing the peanut M&Ms. Right? You need somebody that has that energy that can continue to push people forward. If you do not have the focus, and that focus really needs to be from on high, but if you don't have that sort of level of focus and energy, it's going to fall flat. So here are some things that we've identified. We've identified here as being important. Being important to a successful system. Talk about the executive buy-in. You have to have the leadership buy-in. We talked about the organizational buy-in. You have to be active in the implementation process. Again, it's not a web development project where somebody goes off and does it, and disappears and comes back with your CRM magically. You have to understand that you are going to have to push and pull and learn and ask and prod through the entire process in order for it to be successful for your organization. You need a leader to run or lead the project. You should understand and have reasonable expectations. Databases and any of the databases that you may look at or CRM systems all have their flaws. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. And I tell people right up front, at some point, you're going to go, why can't it do this? That's just simple. I'm going to go, that's all I got. Because that's what it is. No, we can't have a drop down for states or, we just put in 2 letters. Well, can't you build that? Yeah, we could. All right? So you need to understand what the expectations and measure them and communicate those to the people that are participating. Understanding the importance of the truth. This is, I'm glad I have a pulpit because this is one of my biggest sermons. I run a nonprofit user group for a specific CRM, and I'm trying to keep this agnostic, so I'm not going to mention any names, but I'd be happy to talk about it at the end if you'd like to. And at this meeting, probably almost every meeting, I mention the importance of the truth. How many people have had a database that is dead now, or has died a horrible death where no one uses it? I'd be willing to bet that the data in there is horrible. That you have first names and last name fields, or you have Joe in the first name field and nothing in the last name field, or messed up email addresses. You can't trust the data. Nobody wants to use a database with bad data. They just don't. If you can't trust that there is truth in your database, no one will use it. If you don't have a database that follows the truth of your organization, right? We don't build a database today and then create changes in an organization for 3 years and expect it to still map the work process and business process of this nonprofit. You have to change the database along with the changes in your organization. If you don't, it does not communicate the truth of your organization. No one will use it. So you have to continue to work on your database, and you have to have someone that is going to defend the truth in your organization. Remember, we talked about having this point of sale data entry system. Well, it's sort of intuitive that if we've got a lot more people entering data all over the place, it's more likely that it's going to be more messed up than having, what did I call her, Sally, the data expert, right? Or Joe, the tech who's entering the forms. So we're more likely to have bad data, but yet it's now more important to us to have good data. What does that mean to our success? That means you have to have someone that is, puts on the cape and flies around and defends the truth. They almost have to be like that. They have to go in and check the data in the system regularly. They have to call out those people that just don't get it. They have to reward the people that are in there doing it right. And they've got to create systems and validation rules and tests and other ways to maintain the proper data. Good data just doesn't happen. It's got to be worked out. So we've created this successful environment. Not easily, but we did it. We have our leaders and we understand what the realities are. Now we've got to start looking at what are our requirements. We're doing this even before we selected the product. Because again, we need to understand if we need a sports car or a minivan. So when we're doing this, the easiest places to look are your inputs and your outputs. Forms, attendance sheets, incoming things that come, stuff that comes in your system. What does the volunteer fill out when they come in to volunteer? What kind of information do we get on a donor? What do we track and demographics do we track for incoming service delivery? Outputs. What do we have to report back to our funders? What does our board need to know? What do I need to tell the executive director about the work I did last week? What kind of reports do I need? The outputs. Those two things will define for me, when I come in to work for you, what is important to you, and ultimately, what are those data fields that you need to track, but also the structure of the database because of the reporting needs. And the thing here that's most difficult for nonprofits is really this business process. So when we build a database, we can do 2 or 3 things here. One of them is create these fields for you, the structure that allows you to do the reporting. But the new systems allow us to do things like workflow and data validation and other things that leverage the system to make us look bigger and stronger. A good friend of mine, Judy, works for the C3 organization and is a true standout using technology. Judy Sohn, and it's the colorectal cancer coalition. Okay, I need a short break. But the idea is they are a small organization. And utilizing the idea of trickle campaigns, so if somebody donates $20 to you today, you don't data dump about everything you've ever done and say, can you support us 1,000 ways? They send out a thank you, and then through workflow 3 days later, it says, oh, by the way, you may be interested in looking at our website here. And then 2 weeks after that, people that have donated very often like to do this. And 2 months after that, another email that goes out and says, hey, we're doing this and we would love for you to sponsor it. Right? There's nobody sitting in their office deciding, oh, Dean got this last week, what does he get this week? What they've done is thought about their business process and thought about these relationships so that it's all set up in the system. And when you put in that first $20 donation, the clock starts ticking and these things go out. So when I go to nonprofits and I say, what's your business process? They go, right? You need to understand how you want to deal with these people, your constituencies, and work and regiment it and document it and bring it all together. Right? Because everybody's got a little bit different thing going on in a nonprofit. We need to bring it together and be able to communicate what that is. And I find that's one of the most difficult things for nonprofits to be able to do. So when we're doing this, we need to sort of take stock of what's going on within the organization. What's currently being tracked and who's tracking it? When do they track it? What is something that's recorded and why is it recorded? What aren't we tracking? Right? That's a great question. What aren't we tracking but we would like to? What are we reporting? And then again, the business process. Now, I got these 3 things on the bottom here because they're sort of, I tend to see different approaches by organizations to what we're going to track. So there's some organizations, we want to track people. That's it. Don't ask me to add another field or look at best practice or whatever. We're going to track what we do. Everybody else we can. Then there's those people that they'll track all of that, but then they also track what we want to do. We want to be able to track more demographics so we can target our e-newsletters. Or we're creating this new program and we want to be able to track the outcomes. We're not tracking outcomes now. We want to track outcomes and metrics around our service delivery. And then the third, and please don't leave this one, track everything you can think of. All right? My best example is an organization that wanted me to put in, this is my favorite field ever, an alternate fax number field. Seriously? An alternate fax? If I'm going to fax something to you, I'm going to ask you what your fax number is. If I don't know it, maybe I'll look it up. If that's not a right number, I'm not even going to know, so it's just a waste of time. So you also have to look and think about how you're going to approach this project. And I will say up front, I've seen organizations do it both ways, and I've seen them fail both ways. So a phased approach. You're going to maybe identify some low-hanging fruits. You're going to build some momentum. You're going to go for the quick wins, or you're going to sort of build in by the silos, very often is the way the phased approach works, right? Let's do volunteers first, and then we'll get the development department. Once they see how well that volunteer thing works, they're going to want to jump in. And after that, we'll go and we'll get service delivery, and maybe we'll then do some board management. You do this phased approach, and for nonprofits, you can go and you can get funding for discrete parts of it, and you can create your focus and lessen the disruption. What can also happen is you do one sort of silo, or maybe two, and then the focus changes or the money runs out, and you've got this sort of half-finished thing sort of hanging out there. So there's very often the desire to, let's get it all done while we can, model of let's swallow the ocean, right? We're going to define everything, every data point that our organization needs. We're going to take the snapshot, we're going to build it, and well, that can be problematic. Your organization changes. I've seen, if you're going to do that, now you're involving everyone, there's more disruption, and you can just sort of lose steam. So you're going to have to figure out which approach is best for your organization, understanding the pluses and minuses of this. Do we tend to get all wound up and then lose steam? Or do we tend to not be able to continue on with the project until it's finished? Do we need to jump out and try to do more, or do we need to take a more thoughtful approach? I just like this picture. It just looked like a nonprofit guy on a computer that was having a lot of fun. So, evaluate the product. One of the things, I've scrupulously sort of stayed away, and I'm not going to talk about which one's better, what I like about different products at all, but you need to start working towards understanding what is the right system for you. So these are sort of the traditional sort of thing. What does it cost? What are its features? Is it easy to use? Are the people easy to deal with? And some of these would be pretty easy to just snap up in a list, and some of them may be a little bit more difficult. The idea of sustainability, I mentioned earlier, it's got to be key, all right? Because it's not something you buy and put on a shelf, like the strategic plan. It's got to be used and fixed and built every day. We've got to look at the idea of data integration. Something we didn't have to look at just even a couple of years ago, because it really wasn't very likely that it was going to happen, and it wasn't going to be very easy. But we've got to start understanding that people are expecting to work with us through the internet, and even the best of these content management systems are not about tracking relationships. And if you get, I love content management systems and all of the people involved in them, but it puts me nuts when I go into someplace to talk about CRMs and they say, oh, we were talking to our web guy and he said he could just build some stuff, we can track our donors and that, right? Those aren't built for that. It's not the idea. You are asking, the pickup truck to haul the semi-load, right? You need to be aware of what you're looking to do. And ultimately, you need to look at sort of the ecosphere of the partners. This is one of the things that I've seen really shoot nonprofits in the foot. So they've got this product and they did it and it's really wonderful and we like it. Now we've got to change and nobody does that anymore. So now we need a new product and we're going to get a new database. So what you want to do is look at the ecosphere that is around a product. How many people do the implementation? How many people support it? How many people are using it? How many nonprofits have it? So what does that look like? And so nonprofits, we all think we're unique, and of course we are. But one of the things we find out really quick is we don't want to feel like we're standing on the island alone. Right? So if you can find a system that has a user group, now you can go and you've got a whole support system built in that's free. Right? User groups don't cost anything. So when we're looking at it, how is it going to hold up? And I needed to put the TCO letters in here because you need to understand the total cost of ownership. It's not only what you need to do to build it. Do I need to buy a server? Do I have to buy software? Do I lease the software? Is it a monthly price? Is it donated? Do I have to pay for upgrades? What is the cost of training? All of these things, not to mention the cost of implementation support. If I don't have an administrator, can I get it, a third-party administrator? What are all those costs going to be towards the nonprofit? So, one of the things you should look for, I didn't want to get too technical here, but I think it's pretty important at this point that the database or CRM you're using has a documented open API. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. So when you go and you use your database, you're using the user interface. You see the little form, you type the stuff into the form. When we want to connect it to a third-party application, a website, a pay site, an event system, we do that through the back. I was going to say through the backside. So we do that in the background. Good thing I caught myself though. So we do that in the background through the API. And if you can find a system that meets your other needs and also has the ability to integrate your data, you're ahead of the game. And really, ultimately, how many people have a form on their website, and when somebody fills it out, they get an email? Yeah. It's a cool idea, but it really sucks, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, I got this email, now what do I do with it? I got to enter it into the database, and it's always a mess. It's a great idea, but it doesn't work well. Right? Isn't it a much better idea that somebody fills out a form on your website and it shows up in your database and you get to look at it and go, yes, accept, and now it's part of your system? That sounds like a lot more fun, right? How about if your members or your volunteers, whatever, could go to your website, sort of log in and change their information about themselves? That would be cool too, right? This requires that sort of interactivity, and this is where things are going. So we're starting to see things where a hunger coalition, has entered data about every food bank and food resource in the city of Philadelphia. Well, how do we get that out onto the web? So we put it in a system that has an open API, we create the website, show up on Google Map, and then just pull the data from the database right into the web live. So you got the little circles, little pointy things all over where the resources are, and you hover over them and it tells you their hours and stuff like that. You do filter searches and so forth. Not magical or new, it's being done a lot, but think about what it would take to get your organization from where you are now to that. Right? There's a couple of steps involved, and if you go and you get a database that's sort of closed, now you're going to struggle just a little bit. Ultimately, when we're talking about this relationship, we want to make sure that we can honor it in such a way that we can do our communications appropriately. We can direct them to the appropriate group. We can record the communications that go out so we know who got what. We can send the sports information to the people that like sports, and the volunteering information to people like volunteering, whatever, and really honor, again, the people that are nice enough to work with our organizations. So when you're looking for systems, every organization, we've already talked about nonprofits sort of each being different. Everybody's got sort of a unique part of their program. So they collect clothes and distribute them out to other nonprofits for children. They may need to inventory those clothes. Or they're doing food kitchen deliveries to shut-ins in the mornings. They may need to do routing and transportation information. So look for systems that can capture the unique work that each of you does. You want to see if it can integrate with your other systems. Very many nonprofits have some sort of governmental DHS, Department of Health, something that requires you to do this database that doesn't talk to anything. Right? The government is great about mandating. We use stuff that is, 3 generations old, and now we've got entry data in 3 places. Well, look and see if that's going to be the case forever, and try to move to a system that can support the other things that you do. Again, we want to capture those relationship elements. If it can't tell you what the relationship is with these people, then obviously it's not going to be a good CRM, and in your road to change your organization to be relationship-based, you're going to struggle. And ultimately, it needs to provide you with that real-time information that allows you to make important tactical and strategic decisions about your operations. It needs to provide you with that real-time information that will allow you to make tactical and strategic decisions about your organization. Bottom line. So you ultimately need to select generally a partner. So very often, sometimes the partner will be the organization that supplies the product. Sometimes you look for a devilishly handsome consultant to come and talk to you, or me. So, nonprofit doesn't know what instance, and they don't get the system they need or want. So you need to make sure that the person you work with gets it. They understand what your needs are. They speak your language. This is, the third item on here is probably one of my biggest pet peeves and sort of core beliefs. I consider myself a solution provider, not an order taker. You do not want someone that's just going to show up and say, all right, what fields do you want on this page? Okay. What fields do you want on this page? Okay. What fields do you want on this page? How many people here feel qualified to determine what the best practices are for every part of your organization? Okay? If, I've come in and I've seen 45 checkboxes on a page, there's never a reason for that many checkboxes on a page, right? And I've seen people that will put membership information for an organization on a contact record, right? And I don't know if you know what that means, but that's just, it's ridiculous, let's just say, right? And so somebody comes to me and they say, you know what, I'd like to put 45 checkboxes on a page. And I would look at it and I say, well, don't tell me the solution, tell me what the problem is. Explain to me what you're trying to do with all these checkboxes. Are we trying to create ways that we can run queries on, for mailings? By the way, anybody ready for a good database joke? Okay, so and I apologize up front. A SQL query walks into a bar. In the back, he sees a couple of tables, and he walks up and says, "Can I join you?" Thank you very much. I told you I was a database geek. I'm sorry. So anyway, you need to understand that you have to have someone that can help you in the process. All right. You want somebody that they've done it before, but they also have a documented process that they can explain it to you so that you understand and you can see what the reasonings are and the ramifications of the parts of the process. You need to feel you need to understand from your partner what the escalation process is, so that personality sort of conflicts can happen. What happens if that does happen? What if this implementer doesn't work for us? We have an issue here, we have a problem. What happens then? Understand up front what the sort of worst case scenarios can be for your organization. Set up and talk about communication. When will it happen? How often? Why are we going to do it? What are we going to talk about? Are we going to have some sort of collaboration site, or are we just going to send emails? You need to understand how your partner works. And then ultimately, I have here feels right, and I, have relatives that have bought cars by looking at them because they just felt right. They can even test drive them. I suggested to do a little bit more than that, but we need to trust our gut a little bit and understand that, oh, well, this person knows their chops. This is going to be a good relationship for us, or, nah, it doesn't quite fit. Manage the project. Right? You need to own up this project. Do not hire a partner and assume they're going to take care of it for you. Because I will say, as a consultant, someone that does this, I've got a lot of people knocking on my door, and I'm doing multiple projects, and occasionally the squeaky wheels are the ones that get the oil. You have to own and manage your own project. I'm here to lead you in the right direction, consult with you, and work with you, but it's your database. In the end, you're going to pay me for my time, I'm going to thank you very much, and I'm going to leave and I'm going to go on to the next project. Now, as a nonprofit consultant, my ultimate thing is I want you to be successful, and I'll come back and bang my head against the wall for years to try to get it right for you, but that's not always the case. You really have to understand and own it. So when you create a project team, it needs to be both wide and tall. What does that mean? It means you need to have someone from the very top of the organization and someone from the very bottom of the organization, and you need representation across the different silos or programs or groups within the organization. You don't need 50 people on a project team, but 7, okay, 8, 3, 12, right? What works for the size of your organization? But you have to have that sort of representation. When you have that project team, talk to them about their dual role. They have 2 roles as a member of that team. So they're there to be parochial, to fight for and express and talk about the needs of their group, their program, their silo. They're there as an expert or a subject matter expert on their little bit of the world. But they also have to understand that they also represent the organization as a whole, and that they need to continually to look at what is in the best interest of the organization. They need to be able to step out of the parochial role and look at a bigger picture. And those are the things that should be affecting your choices of the people in your project group. Are they able to do that, or are they so parochial that they'll only look what's good for the IT department, say? Right? And then again, they all have to provide communications. So the partner needs to communicate with the project lead needs to talk to the team, part of their responsibility is to go to talk to their different parts of the organization, and that information all has to roll up. Communication is the key to these projects. So, can you see that all right? I'm just concerned about the coloring here. So this is an example of a project process. So this first sort of circle over here at the beginning is sort of requirements, definition, or gathering. And traditionally, in the old sort of waterfall days, somebody would come in and would spend 3 weeks, 6 months, a year and a half, whatever it was, doing business analysis and collecting requirements. They go through and they get all down to the data fields and they write it all up, and you'd sign a form that says, yeah, here are our requirements. They go away for 2 weeks, 6 months, a year, and then come back, ta-da, here's your database. All right? That they seem to discover doesn't work really well. Funny thing. So now there's a system that's called Agile Development, and I'm by far not an expert in Agile Development, but the idea is you're taking smaller chunks. You're collecting requirements, you're validating them, you're building, you're testing, and reviewing smaller bits of functionality as you go forward. So it fits the idea maybe of a phased approach a little bit better, but the idea here is that it's A, iterative, right? We're going to do requirements, and we're going to talk about business process, and we're going to go around it. And it's smaller in you're looking at smaller bits as you go forth. So that's an example. Not everybody is going to do it necessarily this way, but this way you're looking at and touching your database well before the end date, so that you're going to come up with the idea of, hey, I want this here, or this needs to be blue, or, oh, what about this field? That will come to you as you're touching it. And again, if the more people you can get involved in this process and understand what it is, right, where we are in this process, the better the buy-in and the ultimate final view is going to be. So after the project here, this is just as important. So don't stop believing. You need to continue to defend the truth for this. Right? And again, it's going to die if it's not true. So it's just as important as really the development. And something that we sometimes forget, I built a database and I even put in business process, but I am not there to tell and teach people what they should enter, why, and how. You need to look at creating a data entry standards document, and there's examples on the internet, of how do we enter street, and what do we do for companies that start with the in the name, and how are we going to address elected officials? How do we enter the address for different offices of corporations with satellite offices? All of these things need to be addressed because they support the truth of your data and aren't really about the implementation. So here's some quick signs that you have in a database. It reflects the work of the organization, you built what you needed, your data is true, and you have somebody that's looking out for all of that, and ultimately it's being used. So one of the things I haven't talked about here so much is that when you do this, your affiliated groups do reap a benefit. Right? So you're not only getting more donations, but you have happier volunteers. Your funders feel and understand that you're coming from a different place and you're not just collecting money from them. Your clients are better served because you can now see what works in your service delivery, and ultimately you can see that 360-degree view of your donors, and they feel like they're donating to something, for something, rather than just giving money and being put through the mill. So I wonder if there's any questions out there. I'm happy to answer anything, if there's anything off the web. Yeah, yes. First of all, we all know nonprofit boards can be a little tough. They don't always have the skin in the game, and it can be a little bit difficult. The first thing is, any organization and any group, whether they're board members or whatever, I think they have to understand what that data entry is, and you need to create a document, hold them accountable, so forth. They'll understand that. My one suggestion would be to look at, we haven't talked much about the cloud, and somebody said to me earlier, go out there and look at how many times you see the word cloud out there in the expo. It's all about the cloud. And I work with a system that's in the clouds. It's out there, it's ethereal. And so there's a system, that would be the one thing that I would maybe say for you to look at, because it supports the idea of that distributed work. But yeah, you absolutely have to treat them and say, this is how we're doing it. And you need to enter this, because if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. So, you're welcome. Yes. So systems vary, and organizations vary, and approaches vary. So I can probably give you some examples sort of the work I do. Most often, what I like to do first is a small discovery project that allows me to see migration data that needs to be migrated. By the way, that is always the biggest black hole in a project, right? And it's much better for you to hit it with a hammer and fix it than to pay me whatever you're going to pay me per hour to fix your data. So data migration, you need to always look at. But so I would do normally a little discovery project where I go in and talk, make sure the system is suitable for them, and basically be able to create a project plan. And that's usually between 6 and say 12 or 16 hours worth of consulting time. And then we go on to the actual implementation. And between sort of iterative things, probably the average is maybe 4 months, with a long of 18 months. And some of that is capacity of the organization I'm dealing with. You know, they only can get to me every other week, or they have a blackout for a month and a half because of their big bike run, or whatever. And so what I try to do is I try to schedule weekly meetings where we can make progress forward. But depending on the size and the scope, if you're doing a smaller development project, there's not a whole lot of magic to development, truthfully. I mean, it's when we start talking about memberships and volunteers, where we can do a lot of different things. You know, development tracking is pretty straightforward. That can be a little bit more discreet. Probably finish that in 6 weeks. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Donors or clients might need access to the CRM. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, many people hold the invitation. They can also have the access. In that case, say teachers, for example.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what teachers? Teachers. Oh, okay. So, yeah, and that's actually so he was asking about a lot of sort of your different constituents needing access to the data. So one of the things is you're starting to collect more data, and you're being interactive, and you're dealing with all your constituents. Now, suddenly, it's easier if they're entering data for you rather than you're entering it and so forth, especially when we get to the point of sale. So there are a number of systems out there now that are creating sort of portals that either sort of a customer portal or a partner portal type of idea, so that it's able to share a certain amount of information and define it. So that you can get a teacher to attend, create attendance. One of the things you should be aware of, though, you should look at what are the limitations of the portals. Are there secure logins so that they can get in there? And does that kind of thing require licensing? So at $10 a license, it's not a big deal for 20 staff people, but if you're going to do 400 teachers, obviously now it's a bigger deal. So you have to look at the solutions available, find out what the functionality of those solutions are, make sure if they need to be secure, and then figure out the pricing. All right? Right. So, well, first of all, how many people in here are sort of what are called like accidental techies? Like really you're a social worker and now you're so the first thing that so that everybody can hear the question, how do we do sort of a rollout when you're sort of doing it internally and you don't have the resources to maybe do everything all at once, and what do you need to think about when you're doing that with different systems? So there are certain systems I think that lend themselves more to that than others, that are more flexible. And so one of the things you want to look at is a system that again is easier for you to work in, but also meets the entire needs, right? So when you're doing that, you have to look at the whole big picture to start with to say, here's a system that can carry us through all the way to the end, but I can just build this part first. So really, you need to probably do some level of work within the organization to just do that, like first, do we need a sports car or the minivan? We don't have to figure out the fields for development, but we need to know, are they going to need something so weird that we're going to have to go in a different direction? So then you can create the buy-in and whatever else, and then they need to understand this is what we're doing. And so really, you need to just create a broad timeline. And it's like any project management. You're going to sort of put it there, and then you're going to try to hit it, and then you're going to make adjustments and understand ramifications of decisions along the way. So you're going to say, this fall we're going to work on the advocacy part, next spring we're going to work on development, and then in the summer we're going to work on volunteering. Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Yes, sir. I think nonprofits have for a long time gotten used to sort of working with things that are broken or things that don't sort of follow their structures. I think that there are enough systems out there that we can find a system that both matches or models what they do and also does best practice. I don't think we have to force, so we want to move to best practices, but we have to understand that nonprofits are individual, and stripping some of that can be really difficult, especially in a small organization. They can shut down, and I don't mean close up, but the people involved. So ultimately, part of the thing here, and I hope you've got that from this, is this is not really about technology. CRM, it's a database or whatever, it ultimately is about the people. And so that if we're putting systems ahead of the people, we can struggle. I do agree, you know, from the sense of let's do what we can, best practice, and if we can create some structure for them around that, that supports best practice and makes it easier for them to do that, I'm all for that. If it is something that's sort of away from the mission, pushes them away from the mission or the way they deliver their services, then we have to look at it.
Not so much away from the mission, but again, the notion of balancing act with regard to different departments.
It's always balancing act. Yep, exactly. Yes. So there, just so that if anybody didn't hear, N10 has partnered with a number of some major sort of sponsors and some others, and it's something I don't know whether NPower has been involved in this time, but we have in the past that did some surveys around CRM use in nonprofits, and so it's a good resource. It's a good white paper, and you should take a look at it. Are there any questions on the internet? I'll get you guys. That popped up? Anything? No?
Twitter's having problems, and so it's limiting Twitter searches.
Okay. All right. Well, that's. I apologize to people on the internet. We care this much. All right. Go ahead. Yeah. So, what do you do if one's failed? Kind of thing. So, the first thing you hope is it doesn't fail, because you know you're. Well, I mean that's the truth. If you can avoid that at all costs, avoid it. If it means you have to change your partner or whatever else to try to survive, make it survive. Because you're right, once you've sort of been bitten, it's hard to get back into. I just mixed up 12 metaphors, so I apologize. But it's hard to get back on the saddle once you've been bitten. What you do need to do is do an honest assessment. You know, the first thing is bring everybody in a room and go, what went wrong? What can we do better? How do we change it? And again, it's that buy-in process of listening to people. You know, so if everybody thinks it didn't work because we didn't eat enough, all right, okay. You know, or it didn't work because we met too much. That could be too. You know, so let's be the same. So it's really about listening. And again, it's a people thing, not a technology thing. So, you know, did we not have the right people on the project team? Did we not have the right systems? Did we not have the right partner? Did we try to do too much? Did we not do enough? I've seen systems and processes fit. I think the failure rate for projects in the for-profit world is over 50%. You know, depending on what your metrics for success are. You know, so there's a high likelihood that it's not going to go quite right. But you need to have honest communication, and that's, you know, let's all sit in the room and we'll bash each other for a while, and then we'll move on. Anybody else? Yeah. Well, so the question is, you got this decentralized, and if everybody can enter whatever they want, you got board members, because they're not always paying attention anyway, and staff, and a lot of turnover and stuff. How do we do that, volunteers? Well, first of all, I will sort of contend with the statement, anybody can enter anything. So in a well-designed system, people can enter what they need to enter. They cannot mess up what they shouldn't mess up. Right? So look for a system that has a good security layer that can both access or restrict records, but also permissions. So that's sort of the two things. What records can I see? And what information about those records can I see? Then you ultimately want to work or have a system that allows you to do validation rules. So if this field has to be a year, if you put the letter D in there, it's going to spit it back at you. So you want to work and do it, and then ultimately it's having an administrator that's on top of it. Because you can have all the validation rules, you can have deduping things, you can have all this other stuff, you got to keep an eye on it. And then smack people in the nose when they do it wrong. You have to, you know, not dance around it. Any other questions? Yeah, one here. Second, not that we can talk about in 30 seconds. The first one, you have systems that are anywhere from on the high end, you know, $1,800 a seat, you know, per user, you know, for a big high-end system, to stuff that's donated to zero a seat. You just have to do the implementation, to stuff that's open source, and you know, maybe you need an implementation or not. So it, you know, it's the broad gamut spectrum, and obviously the return on investment would be largely determined by, you know, what your outlay is of cash up front. So there's a system out there at this point for everyone, and like everybody's price point, but make sure the system that you're buying is the system that you need. So that's as close as I can get to the money thing. We've done implementations probably on the low end, consulting-wise, probably 4,000 to 6,000. They're pretty streamlined, and we've done stuff as big as 30,000 and 40,000. And we're not the biggest implementer. We just do nonprofits in Philly. So, you have a quick question? Okay, you can ask me after. So this is because I'm a coach and I feel like we need some sort of statement at the end. And then I'm going to say that feel free to contact me. Here's one of the things, being a nonprofit solution provider, I do feel like I just need to be, I'm happy to answer questions if you have a question. I'm not going to charge you for the time or anything like that. And lastly, I thank you. I appreciate the time and the attention. Enjoy the rest of the conference.